Hi, this is Justin Colletti. You may know me from Sonic Scoop, but today I am on the Plugin Alliance channel, and we are checking out the latest plugin in the Plugin Alliance family from Lindell. This plugin is called the SBC, which stands for Stereo Buss Compressor, and it is an exacting emulation of one of the most popular hardware compressors of all time. The VCA compressors made by API, notably the API 2500, that's the kind of compressor this is based on. And right alongside the very best compressors from SSL, the API compressors were some of the most popular and still are today. For the past couple of decades or more, they have been essential for particularly rock mixers, but also pop mixers and across genres. They just give this kind of tight, aggressive, smooth, but punchy kind of compression where you can get a lot of transparency, but with a little bit of character and edge at the same time. They're beautiful for bus compression for your main mix bus, for drum bus, where they can be either subtle or absolutely smashing. They can work on things like bass or even vocals where you want a lot of compression without it being overly artifacty, but you still want a little bit more character and drive. So really cool sounding tool. We're going to listen to it together on some bus applications because that's what this is really designed for, but you can use this on individual channels as well. Before we get into hearing this together on some actual tracks, I just want to take you through what each one of the knobs on this plugin does. It's pretty simple, pretty fast and easy to learn, and has a couple of features that you're not going to find on most Stereo Buss Compressor plugins. All right, let's take a look. So first off, right here on the far left, pretty obvious, your threshold control. You've got attack, ratio, and release, standard fare for a compressor so far. The attack is variable from a super fast 0.03 milliseconds all the way to a fairly slow 30 milliseconds. You've got an adjustable ratio that goes from very gentle 1.5 to 1 compression all the way up to brick wall limiting of infinity to 1, and a release control that varies from fractions of a second all the way out to 3 seconds. Now, where this plugin starts to get really interesting is in this variable link control that you would find on the original hardware as well. This variable link control lets you decide just how much the left and right channels are going to be linked. And this is kind of uncommon on compressors. You're finding this more and more on modern digital limiters these days, but when it comes to the analog domain, this was one of the first really popular pieces of hardware to integrate something like this. This link control will go all the way from 0% linked, all the way up to 100% linked left and right, with stops along the way, 50% linked, 60%, 70, 80, and 90% linked. Extremely useful feature because there's always trade-offs when you're doing stereo linking, particularly on things like stereo drum bus or stereo mix bus. If you have your two compressors totally unlinked, you'll tend to get a slightly wider sound, but you'll tend to sacrifice some of the stability of the center. If, on the other hand, you completely link your left and right compressors together, you get a little bit more focus in the center, a slightly more solid stereo image, but you get slightly less width in the left to right spectrum. And being able to unlink your compressors just slightly down to 90% or 80% or 70% can help you get the best of both worlds. So a great feature to have here. And another cool thing about the link control is you can decide to link just the high frequencies or just the low frequencies or do a bandpass filter. So you're really just linking the mid-range and leaving everything else unlinked. And there's more filters coming up in just a second. Down here in the lower left, we have probably one of the most fun buttons on the entire unit, this NUKE control, which basically sends this compressor into overload. We're sending more signal into the input stage of the compressor, making it clamp down harder and getting some really over-the-top sounds. Really fun for things like drum bus and particularly parallel drum bus. And you can even add to this with the THD control that allows you to drive more total harmonic distortion. You can turn this to the right or turn it to the left to get even more saturation and edge out of this compressor. And we can hear that together in a little bit. Another section that has some really unique features is the tone section here. You can go through 3 different shapes for the knee of the compressor: soft, medium, or hard. Soft being the default here, where the compressor's threshold is almost a little bit more like a blurry line than a firm line. where signals that are starting to approach the threshold or get beyond the threshold slightly get compressed a little bit less, and signals that are much above the threshold get compressed a little bit more. Contrast that with a hard knee, where anything that gets past the threshold is immediately pretty much being compressed by the full amount, and you can also go for a medium knee right in between the two. But one of the other features that was really unique on the original API compressors on which this is based is the filter section here. They had a trademarked option called thrust back on the original API compressors, and this does a very similar thing here. Our basic filter type means that there's no sidechain filter being applied, meaning that the signal that you're sending into the compressor's detector circuit, what's telling it when to compress and how much, is the same as the signal that you're hearing. But when you apply these filters, what that's going to do is send a slightly EQ'd version of the overall signal to the detector circuit, and then use that to compress your main signal. What does that mean? Well, pretty simple. One of the big problems with using a conventional compressor on things like mix bus or drum group is that the lowest frequency instruments like kick and bass that have the most energy can end up being the only thing triggering your compressor. And things like your snare drum or your vocals or your high cymbals or high percussion might not get grabbed by the compressor at all, because the low frequency instruments are the only thing that's triggering your compressor, but just because of how much energy is in them. But as soon as you click this filter button and go into this medium setting, you can see that there's going to be a low frequency roll off and a little bit of a slight high frequency boost. This means that we're going to de-emphasize low frequencies in the compressor detector circuit. So it's not just your kick drum and your bass being the only things that are triggering the compressor anymore. There's also a little bit of a lift in the top end, and that's going to make sure that some of those high frequency instruments with the least energy still get touched by that compressor. There's also a third setting which takes this same idea and makes it a bit more extreme. More significant low frequency roll off and more significant upper frequency boost. Super useful, especially on things like overall mix bus and drum groups as well. One more unique feature here that you don't find on a lot of compressor plugins is this style button, which changes between a feedback and a feed forward design. This is something else that you might not have heard of or might not have really familiarized yourself with in the past, but it's so useful to have in a compressor. By default, a feedback design means that the compressor is taking the signal you've already compressed and feeding that back into the detector circuit. So this means that the part of the compressor that's telling the compressor how much to compress is being fed an already compressed signal. And this generally leads to a somewhat smoother and more transparent overall approach to compression, where the compressor is not overreacting too much. It's not trying to clamp down on bits of the signal that have basically already been compressed. With the click of a button, though, you can change this to a feed-forward design. And that means that we don't listen to the already compressed signal in the detector circuit. So here you can get slightly more intense compression, which is also a cool sound when you want the thing to be a little bit more aggressive and bite down a little bit more on your loudest peaks. So two great modes of operation. If you just leave all of these in their default settings, this is an absolutely fantastic sounding compressor that way. But just being able to tailor the knee, the filter, and this feedback versus feed forward is a great way to get extra refinement and extra types of personality out of the compressor plugin. All right, last two sections here are output and VU. And even this output section has a really cool feature in it. By default, our makeup gain is in a manual makeup gain mode, but we can switch it at the click of a button to automatic makeup gain. So now when we go over to our threshold control and apply more compression, we're automatically bringing up the signal by the same amount we are compressing by. So we can hear basically level match before and afters as we go. Super useful, super glad to have it here. If you prefer manual makeup gain, just leave this light on and there you go. But there's more cool stuff happening right here in the output section. There is a compress button here, and we can turn compress on or off. And when compress is off, one of the cool things here is we're still running through the analog circuitry in this compressor. So we're still getting some of the tone of the compressor. If you're applying additional THD, total harmonic distortion over here, we'll still get the additional saturation and overload and the color of this compressor, even if we're not applying any compression at all. Or we can hit this bypass button, and that bypasses the entire compressor altogether, including the models of the analog circuitry in here. Last but not least, there's a VU meter by default showing us gain reduction, but we can also switch it to showing us output or input levels. And that's it. All of the controls on the SBC from Lindell. Fantastic sounding stereo bus compressor. Of course, the best way to hear it is on your own track. So if you haven't already, go over to plugin-alliance.com where you can download a free trial to this or anything else they make for 2 weeks. All right, let's hear this thing in action. I'm going to drag it down a little bit, and let me bring up the unmastered version of this track as well here so we can hear these back to back. This is a soon-to-be-released track called Strange from a great band called Sebastopol, and the mix sounds pretty good right out of the gate. Let's hear the before real quick. Bring it into a verse. So pretty nice, good mix overall. To me, the hi-hats are poking out a little bit, so I'm probably going to want to use a slightly fast attack compression setting to try to smooth out the transients a little bit on this. So I'll go ahead and dial in. Let's start with a pretty fast attack time here and set it to pretty fast, medium fast release over here. And we'll take the ratio down a little bit to work a little bit better as a bus compressor. Now I want to link the left and the right, but not all the way. So maybe let's turn it up to 70 or 80% linked. Something I definitely want to engage here is this filter. So we're taking some of the low frequencies out of the detector circuit and loading some more of those high frequencies into the detector circuit. Maybe do a little bit of a sidechain roll off here as well on the low frequencies. Let's go ahead and center this plugin on the screen. And we'll hear the before up here and then the after mastered version. I just did a quick remaster of this track using nothing but Plugin Alliance plugins. You can hear the full final version of the master on the band's page. We'll link to them down in the show notes below. So let's hear this before and after. I'll play the unmastered version and then the mastered version. We are going to hear a little bit of a jump in level, but as we go along further, I'll try to level match a little bit more. First, I'll play the mastered one with the compressor bypassed, and then we'll bring it in and start to go into some extreme settings so you can hear just how kind of smooth and punchy this compressor can sound, even when you're doing ridiculous amounts of compression, probably more than most people would do in a mix bus or mastering context. Let's go. And that's pretty cool. Even in the NUKE setting where I'm doing 10 dB of compression, the mix still sounds like a mix. Is that as much compression as I would likely use in mastering? Probably not. But it's cool to know that you can push it that hard without running into real issues, and the thing becomes more massive and more beefy sounding. Now, you can do this big of a change without hearing so much of a level change thanks to the auto or manual gain feature here. I'm going to take it out of manual mode, and now we'll hear an automatic gain change. So when I hit this NUKE, we'll hear all the extra compression that it's giving, but not all the extra level. Let's try this again, this time right from that chorus section. First, starting on the unmastered version, brought up in level. So that's a lot of fun to hear this thing pushed into some additional saturation, some additional nuking, and still hear the results be usable, even with gain reduction of like -10. You could apply this kind of nuked approach to a drum bus and push it even further for great parallel compression. And again, this same type of thing works super well on vocals. But the best way to hear it is to hear it for yourself on your own tracks. So I'm going to encourage you to go over to plugin-alliance.com where you can try out this or anything else they make for free. Or if you're in the Mega subscription, this is now just part of your Mega subscription bundle. If you have any questions about this or how to use it, let us know in the comments down below, or let us know, what did you think of this plugin? Have you tried it yourself yet? What are some of your favorite applications for this style of compressor? We always love to hear from you. Thanks again. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop, this time on the Plugin Alliance channel. See you next time.